We left our last talk with Stephen before the Sanhedrin, and he was called upon to give a defence for what he believed. In a long and detailed explanation given by Stephen, he recounts the story of Abraham. And he tells us in that particular chapter that Abraham went into a land that he says that God would show him. And afterwards he received none of it, not even as much to set his foot upon. In fact, when it came time that his wife Sarah died, he had to purchase a cave off the local chieftain in the area for the purpose of burying his wife. So much for inheriting all the land from the Euphrates to the Nile. It also says in Hebrews chapter 11, where it talks about the Abraham having received the promises, but not having died in faith. It also says at the end of the 11th chapter of Hebrews, in verse 39 and verse 40, that why is it that God didn't give the inheritance to Abraham then? And he gives the explanation. He says the time for the giving of the inheritance to Abraham will be at the same time as the inheritance is given to all the faithful. So if Abraham, Isaac and Jacob inherited the land now, they'd get a 3,000-year advantage on those coming later. So he says that they all died and they're all waiting. They've not received the promises, but the promises are sure and will be fulfilled. The question therefore remains, when? When will the promises actually be fulfilled? Now we have to traverse the rest of Scripture to find out the answers to some of those important questions. But before we do that, I just want to take you to the book of Romans. The 4th chapter of the book of Romans is a very interesting chapter because it deals with Abraham in a very important way. He says that of Abraham, in the 4th chapter of Romans, that Abraham was promised to be the heir of the world. Now that increases the size of the inheritance of Abraham, doesn't it? Now whatever the word world means, whether it just means the local area of Israel and the surrounding nations, or whether it means the whole globe, is not clear by that particular verse. But we do know that Abraham is the heir of that particular portion of land. Now what I want to deal with very briefly now is the word seed. Because although we've said Abraham, Isaac and Jacob would inherit the land, the next question is, it says, and to thy seed forever. Who is the seed? Now that question's answered in the New Testament in great detail, both in the 4th chapter of Romans and also the 3rd chapter of Galatians. Who are the children of Abraham? In the 4th chapter of Romans, he tells us that the people who have the same faith as Abraham are the children of Abraham. Now that can be by natural descent, that is, people who are Jewish by birth and who have the faith of Abraham, or it can mean those who are non-Jews. The biblical terminology for that is Gentiles. If they have the faith of Abraham, they also are counted as the seed. Check it out in Romans chapter 4. But in another passage in the epistle to the Galatians, he says, when God made the promise to Abraham, unto you and your seed, God had in mind a particular seed. And he says that the seed wasn't multiplied, or a multiplicity of seeds, but one seed. And he tells us, but we'll leave that to our next episode.